Good evening. Welcome to another week of the Next Level Broadcasting Show. I am Eric Huffman, joined by Jared Stamen and Charles Strail behind the desk. And we've got Tom Clementson joining us via stream through the computer tonight. So it's real nice to have Tom in for us this week. There he is, out of his studio tonight. Tom, good to have you with us this week.
Great to be back with you guys.
Awesome. We've got a jam-packed show. We're going to jam-pack this into a smaller show as we're getting ready for the high school playoffs. We'll go over last week's games, plus we'll go over the fallout from the Michigan State game and talk about that for a few minutes. And then getting into the high school playoffs, we want to pose the question of if we think the current point system is fair or the way these schools are getting into the playoffs. Is the path that they take a fair route to get there? Are there some changes that need to be made? And then we'll break down the opening week playoffs of the high school football season coming up this week. And we've got 4 games coming up, 3 on Friday and 1 on Saturday. But again, we'll get into that later on. So right now, let's get into our highlights from last week. We had Jared and myself did East Jordan.
EJ goes 3 and out in their first possession, and then on the defensive possession, well, mistake by the Elks leads to early, easy 6 points.
And that was the way the game went for Elk Rapids. A lot of miscues on the night. Yeah,
they definitely did not play their best game of the season near the end, but it was a cold, rainy day throughout. The field was all wet, so I mean, some of those parts did play a factor on both teams.
Big pass play to Max Beal there.
Yeah, because Max Beal, there was a couple explosive plays by East Jordan, but other than that, this game was a bit of a slugfest, Eric. There wasn't a ton of offense throughout the game.
No, and again, getting to where I covered Elk Rapids this year, coming off 2 40-some point performances, I expected them to come in and possibly put some points up on the board, and they just kind of came in and looked a little lost this week compared to East Jordan, looked more well-rounded.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree there. Elk Rapids did not leave their best football out in the field, and East Jordan knew that this was, going to guarantee them pretty much a home playoff game, and they came to play. I mean, the second half as well, they came out early. I don't know if we're going to see it. We'll see in this next highlight, but they did a little bit of an East Jordan classic, and for those who follow along, you could probably assume what that may be there. But touchdown at the end of the second half there, and then onside kick.
And it actually worked this time,
and it ended up giving them an extra possession, which did not lead to a touchdown. I think there was, no points in the second half, Eric?
So, yeah, we were wondering if there was going to be any points taken because, again, it was miscues. And I know we had some rain come down a little bit in the second half, too, which obviously affected the way the game was being played.
Yeah, but overall, just East Jordan took care of business. They didn't really have to do that much in the second half. Defense really took care of the rest. Ollie Trammell and the crew couldn't really get much going on their week 9 of football.
No, and so Elk Rapids will finish the season. This was their chance to have a winning record. Yep. So they'll finish the season 4-5, and they'll graduate. I have like a handful, like maybe 6 or 7 seniors. But what we talked about post-game was about the youth movement for Elk Rapids.
Oh, yeah.
And their 7 or 8 sophomores on varsity and their JV that's had a stellar year. And we've had the middle school coach, Liberty Provost, in the booth for a couple of games. And the middle school program is doing well, too. So the youth movement in the future of Elk Rapids looks really bright. They are just not going to make it in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, they definitely got a lot of bright spots. Sophomore quarterback Ollie Trammell only going to take leaps in the next 2 seasons. So a lot of hope for that Elk squad.
So we'll move on from that game, and we'll get into Charlevoix at Kingsley, a really intriguing matchup as you had an undefeated Charlevoix team coming in against a Kingsley team with 2 losses, but yet I always talk about strength of schedule, and you're only as good as your schedule. Was this going to be a schedule game as we're getting into the highlights here?
Yeah, I mean, I think both these teams really wanted this victory. Obviously, Charlevoix proved an opportunity.
Right.
And we're going to go ahead and send it over to the announcer for this game, Shane Smith, as we'll let him take it away with his calls of the game.
Speaking of running downfield, Colin Jets, he gets away from a tackler. He's got it all the way. Charlevoix, the first to get 6 on the board. And that one gets through the stout Raider defensive line. Kingsley going to answer right back just 2 plays later with a touchdown of their own. Blaine Sommerfeld Be another pass play coming up. Unloading one, and the catch is made. Colton Goldfull still on his feet, avoiding tackles, down to the 5, the 10, and he is brought down. Looks to be just short of the goal line. For the Stags, got another pass play. That one bobbled, but caught, and it is a Stags touchdown. 5:43 to go. Quick look over to Carter Greenacre, spins around 1 and 2 tacklers, and gets down inside the 30. Jess with the fake handoff goes for a pass downfield. Carter Greenacre finally gets that one hauled in, and Charlevoix gets a touchdown. And working through the line and into the end zone. No problem there. Alex Drury once again. Colin Jess rolls out looking for a man, lets it go downfield, and it's intercepted. And we've got another big run. Nobody's there to get him. Kalen Titus was the closest there. Colin just looking to pass this one. Talon Jacobs able to haul it in. Can he get there? Waiting for the official call. No, he will be just short. And Ian Moran, he's in. Charlevoix touchdown from the 1-yard line. Ian Moran gets it in. Charlevoix gets to their 18th point of the game.
Knows how to give a call on a game, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he sure does. Keeping it entertaining, even though Charlevoix they look to start strong with that opening drive touchdown, but the Stags offense just too much for that Raiders defense, as you saw with that 44-18 final.
Yeah, and again, we'll get into Charlevoix's playoff matchup later in the show. Right now, we're going to move it on to Tom Clementson and crew. They had a game that I penciled on, I believe, the beginning of the year when the schedules came out. Gaylord St. Mary's went to Inland Lakes in another meeting for the Ski Valley title. And Tom, you and your crew take it away for these highlights.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't actually at that game. But I did watch via Next Level Broadcasting. Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I saw, Charles, is the halftime adjustment that Inland Lakes made was, to get their quarterback away from the pressure. St. Mary did an excellent job bringing pressure up the middle and forcing him to make hurried throws, blowing up plays in the backfield. St. Mary was excellent. And then what you saw Inland Lakes do is they just use bootleg, they use rollout, and they just kept their quarterback away from the pressure. And then they had options between, pass plays, quarterback runs, and then, Bradford, who is excellent. And then the defense seemed to feed off of that as well. You saw the other Bradford up there on that defensive line was forcing O'Connell to make some decisions that maybe he wasn't comfortable making in a time frame that he wasn't comfortable with. So yeah, Inland Lakes did a great job second half, and I think the youth and the discipline kind of showed itself in that second half.
Yeah, I think some of those points are very well articulated, Tom. I think we saw a lot of those things truly come to fruition for the Gaylord St. Mary Snowbirds, the youth. And I talked to head coach Kevin O'Connell before the game, and he said, we've got a bad habit of getting frustrated and allowing that frustration from one play to really boil over into another play. And we saw that happen time and time again because they let one play, which was the onside kick at the beginning of the second half, or the first play of the third quarter, it really impacted how the Snowbirds played in the rest of that game. That onside kick there that they had, that the Snowbirds had, and you don't want to let that impact you, and they certainly did. And I thought that was one of those plays that amplified and snowballed into what led to a tough loss for the Snowbirds.
Oh, it certainly was. I mean, you could see that. I mean, the wheels didn't exactly come off. I felt like the team was competing, which is, under the circumstances with a very youthful team is something you want to see. There's a lot of positive signs. I mean, we were all hoping they'd get the monkey off their back this year, but not to be this time around. And you got to give credit to Inland Lakes. They brought their A game, especially in the second half. Their adjustments were outstanding, and I feel like St. Mary's probably, maybe not now, hopefully not now, but Monday we're probably disappointed that they left some things on the field.
Tom, we're bringing Eric and Jared back in here. So,
Guys, as we take a look at this and we bring all three of you back in here because we ran through those highlights. The Traverse City St. Francis Gladiators last week did not have a game, so not a whole lot to talk about from their standpoint because of, that they weren't in action. And with that being the case, we'll just keep it moving and keep going right on down the line because we really just want to break down, all these different things because we do cover high school football.
Yep.
But ultimately, as we shift gears now, let's shift gears into the Michigan State versus U of M conversation.
Yeah, and some of the talks that we were having beforehand was after this last game, so much talk has come up of are either of these teams worth our time this year or right now? And with the current state of Michigan and Michigan State, is either team structured to win the Big Ten? Obviously not this year, although people want to say Michigan has a chance this year. But in the near future, can either of these teams win the Big Ten? Jared, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Eric, for bringing me in here.
Yeah,
And,
are they worth your time? And is the current structure good for them, or some changes need to be made?
I think you're a fool if you think either of these teams are worth your time. That's my opinion. I mean, I think you've got a lot of reasons why the Spartans aren't good, and you can stem from the coaching to just the talent pool to quarterback play not being where you want it to be. There's so many reasons to not be a Spartans fan, but we talk a lot about the Spartans here. I want to talk about the Wolverines and why they are the most disappointment team. The fact that they're in the top 25 is just a disrespect to the top 25 rankings. To think that they could beat 24 other teams that are in that rank is just ridiculous. They are not a very great team. Michigan State, who has struggled all year, I know this is their big game. It's a rivalry game. They're going to play harder than they play against any other team. But even that being said, with the talent that Michigan has, you would expect, or the talent that people say that they have, they should have dominated Michigan State, even though it's on the road. And they didn't. They don't seem to trust their $12 million freshman quarterback. And if Justin Haynes isn't getting going, then your offense is pretty much kaput right there. The defense, it's a Michigan defense. I don't think there's a ton to complain about. But to think that this team has any chance of making the playoffs is ridiculous. But even if they do, whoever has them ranked in the first matchup is happy because they're going to be getting to the next round almost guaranteed. So all that being said, both these teams next year is what you're looking forward to. And for Michigan State, you're looking for a coaching change. And I think Michigan in the next year or two, we're going to be looking for a coach change. I do not think Sharon Moore is the guy that's going to take you to that next level.
Well, thanks for those takes, Jared. And Tom Clementson, what are your two takes on these teams? I know you're quite the Michigan guy with the stadium in the background there, but give me your honest take on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, well, I mean, either Jared's right or hopefully it's just some savvy, long view approach by Sharon Moore and the Michigan staff. And what I mean by that is if you go back to Urban Meyer's tenure from Ohio State, he was really sharp with one thing. He was only concerned really about beating Michigan, period. And so I remember Ohio State fans were really frustrated with him a lot of years, particularly go back to when Cardell Jones was the quarterback, right? They really were questioning whether that offense had what it took. And then what you would see in those last couple of games leading up to the Michigan game was a lot more splash plays, a lot more polish, right? And there were new plays and concepts that were being installed specifically for that Michigan game. So what you saw up until the last couple of weeks, was not the same team that Michigan would play and ultimately be beaten by Urban Meyer's team. And so the thought is, a lot of pundits are looking at Sharon Moore. Why is he protecting this kid? He's getting all this money. I think what he's doing is, why put all that on tape when your goal is to beat Ryan Day again, right? And ultimately, a Michigan fan, the fan base, there's only one game that really, really matters. With Michigan State being in decline at this point, you can kind of say, yeah, it's a rivalry game, but they're not really up for the rivalry at the moment. And I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but that's the reality for a lot of reasons, culture being the number one problem. But for Michigan, I think if this is not a hedge and holding this offense back, waiting for this last game, then Sharon Moore probably is going to be looking for a new job in the next couple of years. If this is truly an inept offense, or at least not as strong an offense as what we would expect, if it plays out like that come the end of November, yeah, Sharon Moore is not going to be long for Ann Arbor.
I'll just quickly say my quick point on this is, with Michigan beating Michigan State, it's almost like being the smartest dumb person in the room. What's it really going to do for you? I think you've got way better teams and programs that are doing a much better job right now. I think Sharon Moore is on his way out. I think Poggi was doing better. Look at the 2 games that he had and the way the teams looked with those 2 weeks. And Smith, I think if he hasn't lost the locker room, it looks like he's losing the locker room. Just look at the expression on his face. It looks like he needs his diaper changed or something. I think he's all worn out mentally already. So I think change needs to be done in both schools, more so Michigan State than Michigan. I think Michigan is in a far better place right now, and Michigan State just looks like they need to blow this up and just start fresh. And so that would be my quick take on that. Charles, you got anything to add on this before we move on?
Yeah, my overwhelming take on this would just be that both of these schools don't really have an identity right now. I think what they each need to find is a way for them to kind of cut through the crap and figure out what they need to do and what they need to find most.
Yeah,
just
nice
jump in
quick
real
take
quick.
and easily taken and well put. I think we're going to move right on to the next thing on our schedule right here, is as we're getting into the Michigan high school playoffs this week. We're going to pose the question, is the current point system fair? The current system is done on geographic proximity, overall record, overall playoff point rankings. But I'm not sure if this is stemming from something specific. There is a team downstate, Warren De La Salle, a collegiate, who is getting into the playoffs this year with a 3-6 record. And I've said it earlier tonight, and I've said it every week. You are as good as your schedule, and apparently they know how to schedule, because their playoff points got them into the playoffs with only 3 wins. And I'm sure Mr. Charles Strahl has a nice little definition or a soliloquy on how this all came about and his answer to if he thinks this is fair, or is this going to the bottom?
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me, I think this is foul. Fair or foul. I think it's a foul take because of the way that it's set up. And let me go ahead and get a little ISO shot here so I can really make my impact and presence known and how I truly feel about this, because one of the things that I can't stand is when we allow these teams to make the playoffs because they have an inferior record, or they just don't have the ability to go play with somebody who's completely better. Like De La Salle, you put them on the same field as like a Menominee, who's number 1 in Division 7. Who are you going to take in that game? Like, I'm taking Menominee. Like, De La Salle is, I believe, Division 2 or 1, and like they're making the playoffs as that 3-6 record. You look at some of the other geographical proximities. Like, if you look at Division 7 right now between Charlevoix and Menominee, they're 2 of the top 3 ranked teams in the state based off of playoff points. Menominee is, I believe, number 2. Charlevoix is number 3, tied for 3, only second to Monroe St. Mary Catholic Central as we enter the playoffs in week 10 officially. So you're looking at a potential district championship matchup between Charlevoix and Menominee, where both these teams will be taking on one another. It's equivalent to like having two number one seeds playing each other in the second round of the NCAA tournament. That's basically what it equates to. Excuse me, two number one seeds playing in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. That's what it equates to, as there are 32 teams that make the playoffs. So after one round, you get 16 teams left, and you potentially have two of the four best teams squaring off in that round of 16. So when you look at it from that perspective and vantage point, I just don't think that we're truly getting is the juice really worth the squeeze for how far we're going based off of the amount of points and just math that we're putting into trying to get the matchups fair, but we're not really going the extra mile to get those matchups truly fair and equitable.
Well, let me add this to it a little bit, and Jared and Tom, go ahead and chime in with your answers or whenever you're ready. Does this also account for you have two 5 and 4 teams, TC West and Central, playing each other again this week, making the playoffs with 5 and 4 records? And we always talk about yearly about you got to get the 6 wins, and 6 wins will get you in. I mean, again, you got two 5 and 4 teams. I think did Mansalona get in 5 and 4 this year again too? So again, we're talking about, is the point system fair? And geographically, maybe it is in certain areas, but obviously, in the case of Warren De La Salle Collegiate, 3 and 6 shouldn't get you anything but a cold shower and a lot of movie time. Jared, anything to add?
Well, I just think I kind of pretty much would piggyback off what you guys said. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with it. It's ridiculous. I mean, you can schedule the toughest teams, but even with that being said, it's 3 and 6, 1 and what? That's 1 and 3 against playoff teams. If you were to break it down, 1 in every 3 games you're going to win. That's not really that great. So, I mean, even if you do a tough schedule and then you do, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, they really need to do some readjusting. I see. It's hard, with the whole state, you have to try and manage what's overall the best, but then you got some cracks in the hole right there with a 3 and 6 team and 5 and 4. There's just some things that need to be cleaned up, but hopefully the adjustments will be made in the future. But curious to know what Tom's thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, 8-player is tough, and that's kind of where my focus has been this year, just because, again, trying to schedule games when you've got teams that, ultimately are running into even problems fielding an 8-person team. And so you're dealing with the schedule monster and all that business. And so a lot of our best competition, if you're Gaylord St. Mary or Inland Lakes, is either going to be far south or it's going to be up in the UP. Fortunately, with the Eastern UP and Ski Valley conferences combining, that'll help. But I look at one game that really kind of just had me scratching my head was Boyne City playing Alpena. Alpena being a Division III team, that's great. Boyne City, raked in the points beating them, but everybody in the state of Michigan just about beat Alpena. I mean, I feel for Coach, going out there his first year with them, but I mean, obviously DJ Shimoniak knew he's got a program to rebuild from the ground up, starting at junior high and building a culture in that whole community with football. So the fact that you get a lot of bonus points by beating a team that I would say St. Mary might have had a shot, right? But yeah, I don't know. The whole thing needs to be looked at, but I don't know that you can get any system that's going to truly be fair. I just feel like when you talk about Warren De La Salle with only 3 wins, I mean, at some point you got to put the eye test to that and say, wait, what?
Exactly. I mean, is there a perfect solution? Maybe not, but there's got to be some way to where you can have things like this happen, or some type of exemption or some type of clause where you don't have teams like that getting in. So thanks, gentlemen, for all your takes on that. And I think we're just going to keep it right on rolling, and let's get right into opening week of the high school playoffs. Yeah. I think we're all set, and let's get right into it. Tom, you got Gaylord St. Mary's going to Mayo this week for a 7 p.m. face-off. What are your thoughts coming into this one?
Well, Mayo's a little bit of a different team than anybody that St. Mary's faced, except for maybe Inland Lakes. They've got a good defense. They don't give up a ton of points. number one. Um, they score plenty of points though. The last couple of games you got to kind of throw out. They put up over 70. One was Bel Air, and it was a 70. I think it was a 76-30 win last week against Hillman, or was it Atlanta? It was Atlanta. Um, so their offense is good. They had a 7-3 team last year, and they brought most of those guys back this year. So it's an experienced team. You've got a quarterback, Brody Fox. You've got Gage Spitzer, running back, linebacker. The O line is really good. You got a couple of big bodies in there. A kid named Gillis, and they're going to see more passing out of this team than they probably have seen from anybody on their schedule this year. Breckenridge was pretty balanced. I felt Inland Lakes was pretty balanced, at least in pass attempts. Um, they'll see more of the same, and the defense isn't going to give up anything easy. They've got some size up front, so St. Mary is going to have to, again, really be disciplined, and they've got to figure out how to maintain that composure, because this is an experienced team that they're coming up against. And Coach O'Connell is going to have to hammer that home. And I think too, the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, they're going to have to be creative in how they approach this. It's a different team than they've seen all year, so I'm sure they'll be ready. And I'm sure that last week left a kind of a foul taste in their mouth, and they're going to come in there and want to prove, that they belong. And I think they can definitely beat this Mayo team, but it won't be easy.
Yeah, I was looking at the comparable records, and it looks like an intriguing matchup. I know if you go 6 degrees of separation, I believe Mayo played Hillman, who played Inland Lakes, who put 14 points up. So it's like, I mean, if you want to try to say what type of team that you're going to face, I mean, it could be a pretty good game, but I would think that Gaylord St. Mary's would be refocused after the last 2 weeks and come in and shouldn't have any problem with this first week, I wouldn't think, Jared, before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of would say the same thing. I think that they're definitely going to see a first round, most likely win, but also for St. Mary's, this is not, they're not seeing this as their year with a lot of sophomores on their lineup. Not that they don't want to win, but the next upcoming years is what their eyes are really set on.
Tom, your final thought and kind of your overwhelming takeaway. I mean, last week you were able to watch the Gaylord St. Mary game, and you weren't necessarily caught up in the fray of being there and seeing it live. Is there something that you might have seen via watching the stream that you didn't necessarily realize being in the booth for the previous 8 weeks?
I saw Charlie Cameron as a missed opportunity in some cases. Like, I know that he is somebody that they will use in their offense, but I feel like he is a weapon that could make a difference. And you and I kind of went back and forth on this a little bit. Logan Grenier does a great job in the backfield. I haven't really seen him do a lot of pass catching. Hasn't really had to. We do a lot of running at St. Mary. But Charlie Cameron, for a guy his size, does a really good job finding open spaces, whether it's block and release behind the defense, or drifting off into the flats, or just running a fade. If they're down in that red zone, he's got great hands, and he can get up for a contested ball too, right? So I'd like to see them use him a little bit more than what we've seen.
Thanks so much, Tom. Jared, you and I are going to head right up the street, and you're actually going to run it back, because you saw both of these teams play earlier in the year. East Jordan's going to host Frankfort for their first playoff game. And Jared, again, you saw these two play earlier in the year. What would be your first takeaway or first thing to look out for in this game, and something maybe that might change the outcome from the first game?
Yeah, well, actually, on your last point, I can think of exactly what needs to change for the away team, being the Frankfort Panthers. And their first matchup, I think this was week 8 against East Jordan. They had close to, if not over, 20 penalties, Eric, whether that was offsides or false starts or even a coach's penalty, and even just some angry penalties near the end of the game. They did not play a clean game of football, and you're not really going to beat any team like that, and especially not an East Jordan team who's really started to clean up the penalties near the end of the season. So then for East Jordan, what they really have to do is get their defense going. When their defense starts getting turnovers, the offense sparks a life. The offense is typically the strong suit of this team, but Boyer, Mayhew, and Dion, that defensive line, when they can get going and strip sack, and you saw it last game, Eric. One of the first defensive plays was a strip that William Webb picked
and
up
don't
for a
forget
touchdown.
Trace Winecoop too on both sides of
Yes.
the ball. We called his name on offense and defense last week.
Yeah, as the season's gone on, Winecoop has increased his role in the offense. He might not be the same athlete that Webb and Beal are, but he's got some great hands, and so look for him to kind of maybe a bit of a breakout in the playoffs.
If
So-
you're gonna
I
go,
was just going to go
ahead,
ahead and
Charles.
bring Tom back into this because Tom did call the East Jordan Frankfurt game 2 weeks ago with Jared.
He sure
So,
did.
Tom, for your take on this one, what say you?
No, I think Jared is 100% on point with point number one, and that's Frankfurt has got to clean up the penalties. Like that game was, they had all the momentum, and time after time they were drive killers, and it gave East Jordan time to adjust. And I'm sure that the Frankfurt players were frustrated. You could see it. I mean, they didn't mail it in by any stretch. Same thing we said about St. Mary against Inland Lakes, but you could tell they were absolutely frustrated, and it just kind of snowballed. And EJ took full advantage of that, and they were off to the races. Like that offense, like Jared said, the offense was sparked by the defense creating pressure and creating penalties.
I'll talk about the defense for a second here because that's the one thing that I was wondering about for East Jordan. And when we watched the Elk Rapids game last week, their defense really came through last week. The East Jordan, when their offense is clicking, they've got big playability, and their offensive line, when they're clicking, is one of the best in Northern Michigan.
Yeah.
But the defense is the one that's been kind of up and down. But last week
Yes.
against Elk Rapids, they really seemed to solidify and use that game to prepare for the playoffs.
Yeah, and one other kind of thing that East Jordan really needs to clean up, and it's been plaguing them from week 1 into week 9, is the snaps. I think they actually lost the snap in that game, and Webb has done a great job of
Probably a
getting
half dozen exchange issues last week. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of been a trend every game is what can they do for center? They've made a center change, same kind of results, but now that the playoffs are here, expect just a little bit of a next level from these centers to really dial it in because they know it is truly win or go home.
I'm in on this next one. It should be a good game with Charlevoix taking on McBain for a home game this week. Another 7 p.m. kickoff. My question about this is this a strength of schedule game, kind of like it looked like last week where you had Charlevoix coming in undefeated, going up against a Kingsley team that had 2 losses, and I don't know, did they kind of get exposed last week? And now you've got a McBain Ramblers team coming up with 2 losses. Is their strength of schedule better than Charlevoix's to where you could see a repeat of last week possibly, or was that a fluke game and you expect a better performance from the Raiders?
Yeah, I think if you looked at really watched that tape from the Charlevoix Kingsley game and just let it bake in, you see the defense making plays. You see Kingsley drop back and throw 2 first-half interceptions that the Raiders picked off. You see a lot of opportunities that Charlevoix had to convert those turnovers into points, and they just weren't able to do that. Their first touchdown play was a 50-yard touchdown run for Colin Jess, and it was the opening score of the game. And as I saw that go live, I thought this is exactly what Charlevoix needs to get out on a team that wants to control the clock and the ball like Kingsley and kind of just grind you into a meat grinder. Unfortunately, Charlevoix was giving up too many big plays against Kingsley, and they just weren't able to get Kingsley down 2 scores, which is ideally what you want to do, because when they get down 2 scores, it's not necessarily the game that they want to play. I think what Charlevoix has an advantage of against McBain will be being able to play in any kind of game script. The way that Charlevoix runs their offense, it's predicated on being able to set up the run, set up the counters, but then also their quick pass game, which is an extension of their run game, getting the ball to their athletes in space and out into the perimeter where guys like Kylan Titus and Ian Moran and Carter Greenacre and Garrison Starrett, those players can get out there, thrive, make some plays, and it's an extension of the run game for head coach Don Jess, and it also allows his quarterback Colin Jess, who has only thrown 1 interception this year so far through 9 games. He does a really good job of taking care of the football for Charlevoix, and I believe that interception came at the end of that Kingsley game in the 4th quarter when both teams are just trying to get out of there injury free. So look for Charlevoix to be able to mix up run and pass and really attack the perimeter edges of the McBain Rambler defense. That would be my takeaway for this game. I think it comes down to which team has a better third down conversion ratio and is able to keep the chains moving, keep the opposing team's defense on the field, and then since both teams are Division 7 size schools, a lot of the same guys on offense play defense. Well, here's the thing. The energy expended playing defense is a lot greater than the energy expended playing offense. So whichever one of these teams is able to keep their defensive players fresher by staying on the offensive side of the football longer, I think really bodes well for either of these two teams having a chance to go home with a victory tomorrow night.
Jared, anything to add?
Well, I think pretty much Charles said it all. I think the defense showed some signs last week, but, I mean, put up 44 points because your offense keeps giving the ball back. Doesn't matter really how great your defense plays. It's kind of reminds you of the Cleveland Browns. Great defense, but if your offense is on the field for only 30 plays, doesn't really matter how great they are.
Yeah, well said. Our last game on the docket for the opening week of playoffs is a Saturday game. The kickoff will be 1 p.m. Traverse City St. Francis going to take on Boyne City. This should be a very fun game. Charles, I'm assuming you're going to be down at this one.
Yeah, I will be down at this one, actually, gentlemen. So it'll be Jared, myself, and the rest of our kind of southern-based production crew. I think this will be an interesting game as well, just to kind of see how these two teams run it back as they played just over, not even a month ago. So they matched up in week 5 this year. St. Francis won a one-score game. It was 20-13, and the Boyne City Ramblers did not score any second-half points in that game. So the Gladiators pitched a shutout in the second half. I believe it was tied or a 1-point game going into halftime. So the only score was in the second half by the Gladiators in the third quarter. And it was a defensive affair, and both teams had some turnovers. The Boyne City Ramblers had the final most costly turnover, an interception. The Gladiators broke some tendencies in that game. They started playing a little bit more zone coverage. And I think one of the things that both these teams have to do is an advanced self-scout. So you need to know what your tendencies are, because you can bet darn right your opponents know what your tendencies are. So if your opponents know your tendencies, you've got to know your tendencies and then be able to make the best derivative decisions off of those tendencies, because you have to assume that your opponent knows what you like to do. That way you can have that counter play, or not even if it's not a counter play per se, but just the strategic counter to what your opponent is trying to do based off of the film that they've viewed of you through 8 or 9 games so far this season. So I think this will be another close game.
Tom, you got anything to add in before we wrap the show up today?
Yeah, I do. One thing I'll commend the Traverse City St. Francis is the fact that they put themselves through a gauntlet to end the season. They've got the week off this last week, well deserved. I think they did themselves a lot of credit by scheduling Notre Dame Prep and Jackson Lumen Christi, 2 excellent programs. And, they didn't get necessarily the outcome many of us would think that they wanted. But I think they did get the outcome that they needed, and that is high-level competition to prepare them for this matchup. And I don't know that Boyne City, looking at their schedule, I mean, there were no gimmies in there outside of maybe one Division III opponent. But I don't know that they really face the same level of competition, and I honestly believe that that's going to help St. Francis a lot.
I think also what's going to help them too is, granted, you normally don't have your 9th week off, but they've had this last week off for the last couple of years. And to see the rubbings of the legs and whatnot towards the end of that last game this week off to get them healthy before facing Boyne City, I think will bode very well for them.
Yeah, I kind of got my own little take on this game. I think you saw them earlier in the year, and like Charles mentioned, the second half was a shutout for the Traverse City defense. And I think that defense is going to continue that through the next 4 quarters. I think that I'd be surprised to see Boyne City score more than 1 touchdown. I think after a week of bye, they're going to be completely healthy. They're young kids. They heal quickly. And none of the injuries seem to be more than just a little bit of muscle cramps or just heat of the game after 2 months of playing football. So a nice week off. to get their bodies right, their heads right. Coach Sellers is going to limit the turnovers that kept Boyne City into that game. And I think that you're going to see a Gladiator team that is ready to fight with a heavy senior class. This is their last chance to get to the dance. And I think they all know it, and they're ready to compete in kind of in their Coliseum matchup, knowing they're the Gladiators. So I really like to see them make a run. I think they give Boyne City the business here. I'd like to see a 30-7 final.
Charles, any last takes before we wrap it up?
Wow, I just want to say, that is a Tabasco take, Jared. I mean, that thing is spicy. I mean, whoo, a 30-7 route in a playoff game is something that you don't oftentimes see. And, since we're on the topic,
Is that bulletin board material?
I don't know, but since
you heard it
but
here first,
I
guys.
do want to do this a little bit because we've got a little bit of time, and this is totally off the schedule for everybody tuning in here. But last week we talked about our NFL MVPs so far through this point in time of the season. Tom wasn't able to join us, and that segment of the show got cut off last week. So I want to run this back, gentlemen, as we got about 5 to 10 more minutes here with everybody. But Tom, we last week did our top 3 NFL MVP candidates. And may I offer you the option to present your top 3 NFL MVP candidates through, 8 weeks, week 8 of the NFL season to the grand jury, also known as our YouTube member community.
I mean, I'm such a homer, man. It's probably not even fair. Let me think on that. Come back to me. I need to think on this a little bit.
What does that mean? It's going to Jahmyr Gibbs, Aiden Hutchinson. Is that kind of what you're thinking there, Tom?
No.
Oh, for top 3, well,
Do they change from last week?
Yes. I actually would say that what has changed is there's one new person in my list, and it's going to be, instead of Christian McCaffrey as the running back, it's actually going to switch over to JT, a.k.a. Jonathan Taylor. I think it's his 4th game with 3 touchdowns on the year so far. I mean, he is that offense. He's the reason the Colts are that great. Yeah, they have a great offensive line. Daniel Jones is taking care of the ball. They've got a pretty solid defense. And, pretty good defensive coordinator who, shouldn't have been fired from Cincinnati. But that being said, I think Jonathan Taylor, I don't think I'd hate him if you put him at 1, 2, or 3. I think he's a top 3 guy, but I'd probably have him right now at 2. I'd say Drake May just falls one spot. It just, he played great against it's been a consensus number 1 defense, but as I said, it's the Browns' defense. Defense gets tired when they're on the field all game. And that being said, my number 1, unfortunately, even though he threw the 2 picks last night or Monday night, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he's the best quarterback on what I unfortunately think is the best team right now. So it's kind of hard not to say, well, if we were going to end right now, 2025 MVP would be Mr. Patrick Mahomes.
Okay, well, I actually changed my list a little bit too. I'm still hopping on the May train.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, Drake May be my number 3. I dumped Josh Allen. Yeah, he's done. Got rid of him. My number 2, I dropped Pat Mahomes from number 1 down to number 2. Again, 2 interceptions last week, but still, they're still on the up and up. But my number 1. I don't know how a running back can win it, but I am going to go with Jonathan Taylor as my number 1 for MVP right now.
Well, I can't really hate you for it, and I know Charles might have to. Well, I won't take his thunder, but he might be agreeing with you.
Yeah, you better not be taking my thunder on that, mister, because, I was all in on Christian McCaffrey last week, and then I saw what Jonathan Taylor did last week. I mean, the way that Jonathan Taylor was able to make that happen, this is his 3rd time now scoring 3 touchdowns in a game, 2 times against the Titans, so you do have to pour a little sprinkle of salt on that statistic. But now he's got, I think, 16 touchdowns, leads the NFL in touchdowns, has a legitimate shot to break LaDainian Tomlinson's single-season touchdown record for a running back at 28. And let's also say that he's got a legitimate shot to do that through 16 games. He might not even need the 17th game to do that. I mean, and you got to take that with an asterisk with some of these new records because LaDainian Tomlinson did that with 16 games. If I'm Jonathan Taylor, I want to break that record in 16 games. So I got to go. I don't have too much time to deliberate on number 2 and number 3, but right now my leader in the clubhouse for NFL MVP is Jonathan Taylor, running back of the 7-1 Indianapolis Colts.
Who's your honorable mention right now?
Honorable mention, then, I would put Christian McCaffrey at maybe 2 or 3. I think Patrick Mahomes is somewhere in the mix as well. I do think that you need to put some interest or just some stock in, and you guys might hate me for this, but I really think you got to pay attention to what Sam Darnold is doing for the Seattle Seahawks. And you might puke if you're listening to this live, or you might start bleeding out of your earlobes. But Sam Darnold has taken a team in Seattle that's got a really good defense, but he's taken second-round receiver or third-year receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba and has elevated his play. He's elevated the play of the other receivers around him. Earlier on in the day, Jared and I were talking about how like Seattle's got Smith-Njigba and not a lot of other household names on that roster. So I think Sam Darnold's got to get an honorable mention for me, especially if they go and, they already had one cross-country visit. I think they play the Falcons this week, and I like them over the Falcons as well. So that honorable mention for me is Sam Darnold.
Yeah, the Falcons are a mess. Tom, who's your honorable mention right now?
Yeah, no, I'm glad Charles brought up Sam Darnold because, it just carries over from last year. The Vikings are killing themselves right now for letting him go. But the reality is, Darnold, and they make this decision before the playoffs even start, was fantastic and should have been in the conversation last year as a quarterback. His problem is playoffs. So I could see that. I tend to lean more Jonathan Taylor as far as like consistent impact. Game in, game out. We'll see if Darnold is able to maintain that. But, May, again, I think, he takes advantage of what his defense, gives him and the players or the teams that he's played against. So I'm not so sure on May. But if I may, I would say offense, Jonathan Taylor. I would say you got to give Aiden Hutchinson a look at defense, just for the simple fact that, coming off that horrific injury last season, took him a couple of games to get going. And now, especially with Aleem McNeil on that line, he is tearing it up. And maybe not a player, but a coach. And we were talking about this before the broadcast. Hey, man, how about our D coordinator from Detroit? Like, you want to talk about patching a defense together with baling wire and bubble gum. I really believe that we have an upgrade at that position, and nothing against Glenn. He was great. But what we've seen so far this season has been a masterful job by a defensive coordinator having to piece that defense together and just getting the level of belief that we've seen from these guys. You got dudes that were packing groceries 2 weeks ago, that are out there not only showing up and filling a spot, but balling out.
Jared, who's your HM?
I actually would say it's a different Seattle player. I think if you're going to give flowers to a Seattle player, it would have to actually be JSN. I think he's the reason that Sam Darnold has looked as great. Same thing with last year, Justin Jefferson. When you have an elite wide receiver, probably top 3, I would say. I think JSN right now would be in my top 3 with Jamar and Justin. Well, it makes you look pretty darn good. And, household names, they also do have Cooper Kupp on that roster, and he's pretty good himself. So I don't know if I'd give it personally to Sam Darnold, but Eric, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I got a quick one. I'm going to keep my man on there. Let's give Baker Mayfield some respect still. Put some respect on his name. He's holding that team together right now. So, again, real quick as we're getting ready to wrap it up here, Baker Mayfield is my honorable mention for MVP for this week.
So one last thing that we want to bring everybody in on this last week as a parting shot as we're sending this thing off, as we're just finishing up. This week, all games will be streamed on the NFHS network, and I know, Eric, you were going to be able to talk on that. Basically, what that implies is that you go to the NFHS network, search the game you're looking for. You want to make sure you see the game published by MHSAA. That will be our stream production right into the NFHS server.
Yeah, and another thing, make sure that you are going into NFHS and finding that game. Because if you start doing searches like on Facebook or whatever, you are going to get 10 to 15 bot posts back at you saying high school football live, and click on this, and they're going to try to get you to subscribe to something that you're not even going to be able to watch. So make sure that you are not getting scammed and you are getting onto the NFHS site. It is a Next Level Broadcasting stream put through the NFHS site. So make sure you are finding the correct game, and we can't wait for you to enjoy the broadcast. So that's going to do it for our show tonight. We can't, again, wait to see you tomorrow and Saturday for the games. For Tom Clementson, for Charles Strail, and Jared Stamen, I am Eric Huffman. And one more thing, don't forget the highlights from these games that we saw from last week will be available on our Instagram page shortly after we are done here this evening. That again, is Next Level Broadcasting on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night. We'll see you at the games tomorrow. Take care.